Hey guys, it's Kat and I'm back today for a first impressions over however many days. 5 days, 6 days, whatever. But this time I am doing a palette that I'm super excited. This has been, I think I've had this for about 2 or 3 weeks now and I haven't wanted to use it because I wanted to do this video. So it is the JUVIA'S Place Tribe palette. JUVIA'S Place is well known for very, very pigmented eyeshadows, and it's been a brand that I've been wanting to try for a while, but nothing really sort of grabbed my attention enough for me to want to place an order. But then I saw this palette and they had a Valentine's Day sale, so I've had this since late February. I think I ordered it from the JUVIA'S Place website. You have to pay shipping, but it was like 40% off in the sales, so it was worth it. But otherwise, I think you can buy it elsewhere. I'll link some places where you can buy JUVIA'S Place. We don't have to buy directly from the brand and pay like international shipping. It costs a lot. But the reason why this palette got me is because it is sort of mainly a green palette, or has a lot of greens in it. Comes with bubble wrap in the actual box, which is great. It's very protected in travel, which is great. This is the palette itself, and it is a 9-pan palette. The pans are massive, so these are bigger than your regular pans. The whole palette contains 32.4 grams of product, which is quite a lot. So you've got a green sort of column, an orangey column, yellow highlighter, and sort of like transition murky color. And I really love these murky colors. I love these sort of greens. I think it's done really, really well. There's 4 shimmers and 5 mattes, which is a nice sort of balance. And I've been dying to just delve into this. So that's what this video is all about. It does come with a protective slip, which will probably go in the bin and I'll forget all about it. And it's just a simple sort of cardboard packaging, nothing too fancy. The ingredients are on the box, but they're not on the palette itself, so just be mindful of that. So what I'm going to do today with this palette is swatch it, show you the shades, give you my first impressions as I do a look using it, and then I'm going to check back in over a few days as I use this palette, as I use all the shades, and get a good idea of what I think about the palette, and then I'll sort of conclude it at the end. So it's a first impressions and then sort of how that sort of develops over time the more I use it. So that's the plan for this palette and I'm looking forward to it. Let's do it now. All right, so we can see the pans here, they're untouched. These ones look a lot more gorgeous in real life than they do on camera. This almost has like a bronze to gold sort of shift to it. It's really hard to capture, but it looks very intricate and really, really interesting. This shade as well almost looks like it's got a slight green shimmer to it. It's quite interesting. This looks like a standard shimmer. That looks more of a sort of chunky, I don't know, foiled glittery shade, same as that one. And then these are just nice sort of citrus colored mattes. All right, just finger swatching them. They're very, very finely milled. They feel really, really soft, like a nice finely milled pressed powder. And look at those colors. All right, swatch time with no primer or anything on my arm, just a clean arm. There's that yellow, it's quite vibrant. There's the matte orange, ooh, it's quite nice. Green, that's a cool green. I really like that green. All right, I'm not sure if you can see, but there is definitely almost like a green pearlescent shift to that highlight shade. These are beautiful. Shimmer time. Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't know, you can probably see it more in the swatch. It's got a green shift to it. That actually make a nice face highlighter as well. There's this sort of copper with a old gold shift. Very, very pretty. And that green, very, very deep, beautiful green. All right, last row, and I'm actually most secretly excited for this green here. I love these sort of murky brown greens. And let's swatcheroo. There we go. It looks horrible, but trust me, it will. It's probably a very nice color and works well with the palette. We've got a shimmery orange. There we go. So these are more sort of chunky sparkles. That's more of your traditional shimmer. And the last one is a nice forest green matte. So that's the palette there. Beautiful. They swatch really nicely. A little bit dry with these mattes, but I think they will apply nicely. All right, so on first impression, these swatch quite nicely. I'm really excited for, and believe it or not, I'm a basic brown girl. I'm really excited for this one. I'm sort of excited for the yellow, that one, and maybe even that one. So the sort of greens and bronzes really interest me. All right, luckily this base is pretty set because this doesn't have like a cream. I like to use sort of a cream just to sort of set this area, but I might actually go in with a tiny, tiny bit of that yellow to put in the crease just to make other colors blend on top. I sort of want to use that, I don't know, I want to use a brown, I want to use the green, but I feel like that on the base right now, they might stick and sort of tug. So I'm just going to use a little bit of the yellow to tap a lot of that off just to sort of lightly set that crease. All right, so I've put a little bit of that on. I really want to go in with this shimmer bronze shade because that's a shade that really, really inspires me. All right, these feel, okay, they do transfer pretty well. They felt like it was a little bit hard to pick up because they have that sort of waxier consistency where you really have to sort of, not dig in, that's not the right term, but you have to really kind of go back and forth to pick up enough product on your brush. I was a bit concerned it wouldn't then transfer onto the eye, but it's doing a really good job. That color is gorgeous. Okay, I have to build it up, but it's like a bronzy color, and the gold, the green gold that it captures is beautiful. What I also think is pretty genius about this color, which reminds me of, there was a MAC like copper green, I think it was called copper green pigment. It reminds me a lot of that. So it's got that orange base with that sort of goldy green shift to it. But what I love about this is that I look at the colors in the palette, and this would work with the oranges, the browns, the greens. It's sort of got all the colors in that shade to really sort of transform it, which is great. Just going in with that sort of murky brown matte just to sort of deepen the crease a bit and blend that out. I'm starting really soft because I don't know how much pigment these are going to deposit, but so far it looks like it's quite controllable. You can see that murky brown. I love these murky browns for some reason. All right, I'm just going to run a little bit of that bronzy shade on the lower lash line. I don't put any primer on my lower lash line, so you can really see how it sort of sticks to the skin by itself. And I feel like it'd be a crime if I didn't use greens, so I'm going to go in with a shimmery green. All right, so I'm just going to put that on the sort of outer corner, and I might put a little bit on the top lid as well. I just want it to be in the outer corner because it's quite a dark shade. Whenever I start using a palette, I tend to use like a lot of the colors just to get an idea of how they mix, and then I sort of pick them apart a little bit, and then I might do looks using just one or two of the shades. Because I want to use a lot of shades because I'm excited about this palette, I'm going in a little bit with that bright green to blend it out, and maybe a little bit of that dark green just in the outer corner. I'm not too sure if you can see here, but there is a little bit of skipping, so you do have to make sure you sort of apply it softly and build it up, because otherwise you can get sort of like the mattes skipping on the skin just a little bit. Not a big problem, but you know, worth mentioning. Tiny bit in the outer corner of the dark matte green. Ooh, that's a nice color. Okay, I'm just going back in with that bronzy sort of shimmer shade. All right, that's the eyeshadow look. I'm going to use just a green liner on my waterline and then use some gel liner and some mascara. So I'm going to do that now and come back with the look. All right, so that is the look with liners and mascara. I've got no lashes on, it's just liner and mascara. I think this definitely does ground the look a little bit more, so it makes it look like it's a little bit more put together, but yeah, that's the look. All right, so that is what the look looks like when you step back a bit. I have to say, on camera, I think this actually looks a lot better than it does in person. It is like quite extreme. I almost feel like what I might have to do, and once again, it doesn't look as bad on camera, is get like a cream eyeshadow and just sort of minimize the look of the sort of crease a bit, because it's very, very, very almost looks like it's up to my brow bone. So I like the colors. I like how it performs. I like how you can use the sort of bronzy shades and the greens and they work well together. This reminds me a lot of the Natasha Denona Gold palette. There's a shade in there that I think looks like the bronze in here a little bit, and the sort of pairing with the teals and the greens in that palette with the golds creates a very similar look to this. So this really reminds me of that. If I actually just saw myself, I'd be like, oh, I'm using the Natasha Denona Gold palette, but no, I'm using the Tribe palette by Juvia's Place. I am actually looking forward to trying this in more wearable ways. So this is a look that I would use for filming or going out, but on a daily basis, this is not the sort of looks that I go for. So I am curious to see over the next few days how wearable this is in a more muted way. So they're a lot more everyday wearable, because that's for me the test of a palette. Not so much what you can create really intensely, but how wearable it is on a daily basis. And I do love wearable greens, so I'm really keen to try this more. On first impressions, I think the formula is quite nice. The mattes being more of a firmer matte, they can skip on the eye a little bit, so you have to be a little bit careful with that. I'm really keen on trying this more. So let's check in on day 2 and see how we go. All right, we're day 2 for the Tribe palette, and today I did something very, very similar to what I wore 2 days ago, the one that you saw. I wanted to go just a basic eye look. I'm going to go out to brunch with a friend, and I just thought, look, wash a brown all over the lid, blend it out a bit with some mattes, off we go, easy. As you can probably see, it didn't quite turn out that way. It kind of just keeps getting more and more bold. So yeah, I did the same thing as I did the other day. Started with this, blended it out with like a combination of these two. And then instead of going into the greens, I went into the oranges. So originally I just blended a little bit of orange into the crease and the matte on the lower lash line. And then I thought, oh, if I'm delving into oranges, I may as well try this one too. So I patted that on the lid a little bit. So it's very similar to the other look, but instead of the greens, there's oranges. Then I wanted to go in with this guy and I put that in the inner corner. And I have to say, this is a really cool color. So it definitely translates more sort of iridescent green once you put it on. So even though I don't mind this look, I'm getting a vibe that this is the type of palette that is probably harder to use in a more subtle way. It's probably a palette where if you want an intense sort of look, you reach for it. But if you just want a subtle everyday look, I find that this is probably arguably too colorful or too bold to be able to do that with. All right, so hopefully you can see I used that shimmery brown sort of color all over the lid. I do also find that this shimmery lid color like migrates. So I found it all up here after I applied it just on the lid, and I actually had to go in with a cream shade and sort of blend that out, because I don't know if you can see, but there is sparkle like all up my lid, and that was just migration from what I put on the lid. So it migrated all up here. I then used a bit of the brown matte and the yellow in the crease, but it was sort of looking a little bit, once again, that weird bruisey color. So I went in with a bit of the matte orange, which I then took down under here. But the mattes they've sort of murkied together. They really aren't as pigmented with a fluffy brush as I sort of expected them to be. When I used the orange on a stiffer brush on the lower lash line, it looked all right, but then once again, it sort of has blended out to more of a warm brown. It hasn't held its orange shade, but the migration is very annoying. You can see that I pretty much have shimmer right up to where my brow bone highlight would be. I might deepen this so you can see. So yeah, the formula isn't my favorite at this stage. All right, I'm back for day number 3, and I tried to create more of a toned down look with this palette, because the last couple of looks I used they sort of got out of hand. Like I'd try to use a brown and a bit of green, and then all of a sudden it just spiraled into like a really colorful look. Same thing happened when I tried to use the brown with the orange. So I thought today I wanted to sort of pair it back the best way I know how and use the most simplest shades. So what I used on my eyes today was I just used those two. So I went for what looks like the light sort of champagne shimmer, and this sort of looks like a brown, but it's almost got like a khaki kind of fake tan green action to it. And then I was quite surprised when I put them on and they created such a green look. Now this is, you can see, a more subtle green look, but it's green. So if you do swatch these, you know, they look like, oh yeah, you got like a, you know, shimmery shade and a transition brown. But when you blend them out, you start realizing, oh, they create really sort of greeny sort of looks. Like you blend that out, you're like these, yeah, they've got a real green tone to them. So I tried to create what is the most sort of natural look I could from this palette, and surprisingly, it turned out very green. So there's nothing particularly wrong with the fact that these two shades lean very green, like it suits the palette, but at the same time, I think it might be the reason why I've struggled with this palette a little bit. So I think what I've been finding is I'll be using this shade and I try to use that in the crease to sort of just deepen it, and then unknowingly I'm just adding a lot of green to the look. So like the last time I had to counteract that with some orange, the time before I just went ham with the green. But I do find that this is not as neutral or as nude as I sort of expected it to be. And I feel like that may be one of the reasons why I'm finding this palette hard to work with. So this is just a close-up of the look. So hopefully you can see that it's got that sort of, yeah, that, I don't know, like phlegmy green color going on, or snot green, or like baby poo fucking brown green going on. And you can see that that shimmer is definitely more of an iridescent green. So this is not a nude look, even though it's using the nude colors. It is definitely a green look. It's just a different type of green. So yeah, it was interesting discovering this. All right, we're back for day number 4. So yesterday I tried to do more of a nude look and it turned out to be just a light green look. So I sort of realized that this palette, even though it gives the impression that there are some sort of nude everyday wearable shades if you don't want a lot of color, since it gives that impression but it doesn't actually deliver, and in reality this is just a really colorful palette, I decided to go quite ham on the color. So I decided, look, I'm going all green. I'm filming beauty news today, so if I wear bright colors on the eyes, it translates quite well on camera. So I thought, look, let's just do it. So I used this in the crease. I have to say this color doesn't apply very boldly at all. I used a fluffy brush. It does have a bit of a green hint to it. So once again, I feel like this shade and this shade are a little bit more limiting than I expected, because I thought this would pair well with oranges. I thought this would pair well with oranges, but because they do have a slight green tinge to them, I feel like they don't work as well as they appear. So I used this on the crease. It didn't really do much. It was just like a soft wash of color. Then I went quite bold on the lid with this shade here. So I packed that on. It did apply very nicely. There was no fallout. It took a little bit of layering to get it bold and even, but not too much. I took that under the eye as well. And then what I did was I took this shade here, this one that looks neutral but does shift green. I put that on the inner corner as the highlight, and you can see it sort of just transforms the matte look to have a bit more dimension. So it's like a topper shade. I'll zoom in and show you in a second. And then I was going to leave it at that, but I decided to use some of this matte green just to deepen the outer corner a bit, which gave it more of a, I feel like it turned the acid green sort of yellowy green look to more of a, like a cooler toned green. So a little bit more of a jade green maybe. So in the outer part, there is a little bit more depth, a little bit more bluey green because of that matte there. All right, so this is a bold look, and you can see there's that yellowy sort of color through there. On the lid, lime green. You can see the shimmer that just adds a bit more dimension to the look, but once again, it's green. And then you can see that I've added a bit of that dark green to make it, once again, a little bit more foresty, a little bit more blue tone green, but it's a very, very bold look. Let's be real. So before I do adapt this a little bit, I do want to say that one thing I do like about these greens, they're very, very bold, and they're not really the greens that I vibe with, because they're almost probably too bold for my liking. But one thing I do like is that you can sort of layer this shade, this shade, this shade, and I'm sure that shade as well, to transform the shade of green. So yeah, if you want to brighten something up, you can add this one. If you want to deepen it, you can add this one, probably that one as well. So I did like that you can manipulate the color green by layering and mixing, because when you look at it, you're like, oh, neon green and then dark green. But if you do mix different things together, you get different nuances of green, which is really nice. I'm going to, now that you've seen the look, I'm actually going to go in with some other shades from a neutral palette. So this is a soft glam, and I'm going to add some browns and maybe black to ground this look a little bit, because the thing that really appealed to me about this palette originally was that I saw it as being a palette that's got bright greens, it's got some warm shades, and it's got some neutrals that you can get a wide variety of looks. You can go bright, you can go neutral, you can go warm, you can go cool. But since using this, I realized that these don't have that neutralizing effect. If anything, it has more of an amplifying effect. So the way I like to use like color is by anchoring it with neutral shades. And now I know a lot of people poo-poo palettes that have like half color, half neutral, but I personally like those types of palettes because you can put in, and you can inject a bit of color, but then also ground it so it looks flattering and wearable. And a lot of people might be looking at my eyes now going, that's a great look. What are you talking about? I feel really like weird in this look. It doesn't feel like me, even though the colors are cool. I don't feel like it's flattering on me personally. So I'm going to now take this palette, go tone it down, and come back and show you how I would prefer to wear these colors. All right, so I am back, and I don't know if you can tell much of a difference from what I had before with just the Tribe palette, but what I have done to my look, if you were curious, I added some of this shade in the crease just to warm the crease up a little bit and take away that sort of acid effect. I put a little bit of this on my brow bone highlight just to sort of blend it out a bit better. Then I used some of the dark brown just on my lower lash line and the outer corner, and I blended out my liner a little bit with the black, because I did find that the black liner and the sort of acid greens, you could really see any imperfections in the liner, and it looked a little bit too harsh for me. I like more of a sort of grungy blended look. So that's what I've done, and I much prefer this. But just as a quick comparison, this is the look with some of the browns and the blacks sort of put in just to ground the greens a little bit and make them look a little bit, less intense. All right, we're back for day, I think it's number 5. To be honest, this has been taking a lot longer than it usually does. When I do a sort of first impressions palette review, I will probably use that palette consecutively for like 4 or 5 days with maybe 1 day break in between. But because this palette is very, very colorful, I have been not actually wanting to reach for it that much. So I haven't used it for 2 days. And today I thought, look, I'll use the oranges. So on my eyes, I only have 2 shades, and I do sort of like to start pulling out certain shades and just using, 2 or 3 together so I can have a really good idea of what I think of each shade. So today I've put the matte orange in the crease, then I put some of this shimmery orange on the lid, and then I put the matte orange on the lower lash line. So I will zoom in and show you that soon, but it's a 2 color look. It's very, very basic, but if I was normally doing a look like this, I would love to reach for maybe like a sort of burgundy brown sort of color to put in the crease, a little bit on the lower lash line to really ground the look, because like I showed you with the green, I find that if you just use colors, it often looks a little bit harsh. Like if you love colors and you just want orange, like you can totally do it, and I'm happy to wear this out. But how I would prefer to use it is like with a little bit of depth thrown in. And I was considering using this shade. I was also considering using the highlight shade, but I really didn't want to add green to this look. And I found that the only sort of options with this palette is to add yellow or to add green. There's not really much in between. So I'm finding that these 2 shades are less and less versatile as I use the palette. Now with the formula, I do think that the shimmer applies really nicely. Like it's very easy to apply with a flat brush. You don't have to build it up. But with the orange, I had to build it up. And this, once again, I think I've mentioned this before, but it's very reminiscent of Morphe formulas, whereas the mattes are quite firmly pressed. And you can get some really good looks with them. Like if you look at my 1 month 1 palette for last month, you'll see that I created some nice sort of colorful looks with the Morphe palette, but you have to work at it a little bit. So when I was using this in the crease, I think I went back to dip my brush in probably about 3 or 4 times. And even then, I don't think this is a very orange, it's not a very bold crease. And I think it might be because the color is quite, it's bright orange, but it's a lighter bright orange. So I just thought quickly what I'll do is I'll compare this to an orange that I really love in my collection that I find a lot easier to work with, and the pigmentation is just easier. It blends nicely. So I thought I'd just sort of swatch those side by side. And then I thought also I might compare this to a Morphe formula because I'm getting a vibe that it's very Morphe, and I think people are going to hate me for that, but that's just my thoughts. So when I think of orange mattes, I always think of this palette by Zoeva. So it's the Caramel Melange palette, and this orange there is phenomenal. It's very, very pigmented and very easy to apply and blend out. But I'm just going to swatch them side by side. Like I said, this is a lighter color. So you can see side by side that the Juvia's Place one is more of a unripened orange color, whereas this is more of a deep, beautiful orange. But I just feel like this is so much easier to build up and work with. And this one, surprisingly, I think it's because of the tone. It just doesn't feel like it's orange enough. In my opinion, I much prefer to wear that than that because it's a lot more flattering. That often looks a little bit sickly. So yeah, for what I sort of look for in an orange, I don't think this color is doing it. And as a bit of an experiment, I just want to swatch this one and this one with a brush compared to, this is the Morphe 02 palette, and you know, for an orange palette, it's very brown. I particularly love the reds, but I want to swatch them compared to those two. So we've got a matte orange and a shimmery orange. So this is Juvia's Place. Just on bare skin. It looks like that with a brush. Then I've just wiped the brush and turned it over, and I'm going to grab some of the Morphe, and I roughly swiped these about 5 times in the pan, and there we go. So I actually don't think the quality is much different. All right, so I've just wiped that off, and I'm going to do the same thing with the shimmers. So I've got a flat brush, and I'm just going to go in with Juvia's Place. I'm going to give this a good shot. All right, Juvia's Place. So it does apply quite nicely. There's a little bit of fallout going on because I picked up a lot on the brush, but it's not a bad shimmer. I think the shimmers are better than the mattes. All right, I wiped the brush off and turned it over, and I'm going in with this Morphe shade, doing a similar thing. And let's apply that. I actually think that's more pigmented. There, that's Morphe, that's Juvia's Place. And we'll turn this brightness down so hopefully you can see it a bit better. Morphe, Juvia's Place. I don't know, I think the more I play with this palette, the less I actually like it. I sort of realized that a lot of the shades don't actually work well together. I realized that some of the oranges that look really intriguing actually look a little bit sickly and not the best, and don't perform a lot better than other comparably priced eyeshadows or even cheaper eyeshadows. In saying that, I do think this is quite a striking look if you like those yellow toned oranges. If you've been looking for true sort of citrusy oranges and you don't want sort of deeper oranges or more sort of like corally red toned oranges, you will like these. I just felt like I had to apply the color on the lower lash line about 4 times to actually build it up to what it is. So I just don't think that these are that fantastic. Even though this palette's really, really boring, I'm gonna go in with this shade here and just add a little bit of depth to the look. I just think that if you want to make these looks more sort of wearable and flattering while still having an injection of color, you do need to put some depth into it. And that browny green color just doesn't cut it. It takes away from the orange. It makes things look murky and sick-like. I just think they should have put some depth, like a darker shade, even a darker reddy kind of shade, just to make the orange sort of look a lot more cohesive. Just gonna run that a little bit on the outer corner as well. And for me, this sort of one step of adding a deeper color, like a burgundy color, just makes this look a lot more flattering and wearable, in my opinion. All right, guys, we're back. I think this is day number 6, so this is a much longer than I usually do these reviews for. Is it day 5 or 6? Anyway, today I really wanted to use this sort of citrusy lemon It's a little bit chartreusey, so it's a little bit green toned, but it's essentially a vibrant yellow. And I've put that all over my lid today over primer, so I've just packed it on. It did take a lot of packing. Like I said, this is not the most pigmented shade. If you wanted to just use this to like diffuse a look or blend out a look, it will add a very subtle yellow to it. So if you wanted to blend out the orange or blend out the green is quite nicely pigmented on the lid, but the yellow, you can see it doesn't actually, like it's clearly yellow. Let's be real here. But it's not a vibrant yellow. It almost, I can see the lid through it, and I really packed it on. Like I think I went back and tried to put like 4 layers on. So yeah, not the most pigmented shade. So this is definitely not the completed look for today. I just wanted to check in and actually show you how vibrant I could get the yellow on its own and sort of how it looks on its own. But what I'm going to do from now on with the rest of the looks that I do in this video, which should only be today and probably tomorrow, is I'm going to pair this with another palette. And I have sort of come to the conclusion that even though some of these shades are really beautiful, like this is beautiful, that's a cool color on its own, that's a cool color, that's a cool color, I still need to use this one. That's what I'll probably use next. So even though I really like some of the colors individually, I actually don't like using them all together. I actually don't think that they work super well together. Some shades do, other shades don't. So to finish off these rounds of looks, I'm going to reach for sort of more neutral palettes or more nude palettes to complete the look. And the one that I'm going to use today to complete this look is the Soft Glam. But before I do that, I'll just show you the yellow. So that's sort of how it looks on the eyes built up. All right, just before I finish, I wanted to show you that putting in some mattes, it really blended away the yellow. So I didn't actually do anything, put any color here, but just the blending action really like blended away the yellow. So these sort of shadows, I don't know, this particular shade really doesn't last well on the eyes, and I'm going to just build it up a little bit with my finger because I feel like I've lost everything just in the blending process. Just a little bit of tweaking action and finishing off the look, and this is what it looks like. I think this is actually a fun look, but I just think the yellow has totally disappeared. So I think mixing it with browns and blending it didn't really hold up. It didn't really stick to the eye properly. I did put this directly onto primer, but it just doesn't stay. It sort of blends away to nothing. So for me, this is not a color that I would reach for this palette to incorporate into my look. Other yellows, absolutely. I think yellow's a really fun color, but I just feel like this one doesn't stay on the eye and it blends away sort of to nothing. So the only way I would probably use this shade is if I was using one of these two shades predominantly or even in the crease, and I wanted to diffuse it a little bit but keep the vibrancy of color, I would probably diffuse it with this. But on its own, it sort of just blends away to not much, and it doesn't look very flattering on its own. All right, so that's a look there. So you can see the yellow just slightly. I've deepened it up with those nude sort of mattes. I put a little brightness in the inner corner. And if that was a vibrant yellow, I think this look would have been awesome, but it sort of just faded off to barely anything, so it's a bit of a shame. All right guys, it's whatever day, I don't know, I've been doing this for far too long, but it's a day that I conclude what I think about this palette. So I have used the greens on my eyes today. I will sort of zoom in a little bit, but I used these two greens and I paired it with the Anastasia Beverly Hills Sultry palette. So I used some browns in there. I used sort of like a shimmery nude on the inner corner because I like wearing color. I do, believe it or not, but I like toning it down. I find this on me a lot more flattering, or a more flattering way to wear dark greens than to pair it with a neon yellow, for example. All right, so hopefully you can see that I have put some nude shimmer on the inner corner. I have put the dark green shimmer on the sort of outer half of the lid, and then I sort of blended it out with the matte green. Now I did find that the matte green turned everything very cool toned and almost looked a bit bruise-like, like I'd been punched in the face. So I went in with a warmer crease color just to sort of neutralize that a little bit. And then I did my liner and I put a little bit of black just to blur the liner a little bit. But you can see the green sort of on the outer corner and in the crease, but it's mixed with a sort of nude color. And I really like this look. I think it's a nice way to sort of work in the dark greens into a daily look. All right, time for my conclusion of the Tribe palette. Now, you probably could sense that throughout this testing phase, I've felt a little bit torn with this palette. And I was trying to think about it, and I feel like the reason I'm so torn is because this was such a hyped up palette. I think Juvia's Place as a brand in general is very, very hyped up. People say that the formula is the best formula, and the pigmentation is fantastic, and the colors are phenomenal. And I do think that what Juvia's Place has over other brands is a really unique way of putting colors together in a palette, and I respect that. And I think that is quite unique and probably their biggest selling point. When it comes to the formula, I wasn't blown away. There wasn't anything in this that made me go, oh my God, this is the best shimmer or the best matte, or I need more of this in my life. There was none of that. The more I used this, the more I sort of felt like it was very Morphe-esque. And you can even see like here, I felt they're quite waxy eyeshadows. So you really do need to like work the pan to pick up the product. That's reminiscent of like the Jaclyn Hill palette in my opinion. So they're not bad eyeshadows. I actually don't think the Jaclyn Hill formula is bad eyeshadows. So that's not a real big dig at this. It's just telling you where I think it sort of fits in comparison to other eyeshadows. So the shimmers were probably the best performing, even though they are that waxier formula. Once you do get them on the brush, they do stick to the eye quite well, and they are very bold. But I do find that you had to go back with the brush multiple times to build it up, because it's not like an Anastasia Beverly Hills shimmer where you pick up enough and it just glides over the eye and covers the whole eye. These you really have to like do a little bit, go back, do a little bit more, go back, do a little bit more. But it's not the worst thing in the world. It is just a different formula. When it comes to the shimmer, the matte, I don't really like the matte formula. The more I used it, the more I realized it's quite dry. It's quite, I don't know, it actually doesn't blend on the eye super well. It does skip on the eye a little bit sometimes, so you have to be careful, and probably best to apply a little bit and then build it up to build up the intensity. But one thing I noticed, especially with sort of the lighter shades, it's just really not as pigmented as I expected. Like, you can make them work, and I think the green was probably the best out of these three here, where you can put it all over the lid and get a bold green. But I found that these two shades, they just didn't build up to the pigmentation that I was expecting from what I've heard about this brand. The green was all right, but I've never used that all over the lid. It's quite a dark green, but it's nice to add a depth to a look. And this shade was an unusual shade, and you know, I'll talk about how I feel about these two shades later, but you are aware already by seeing me check in. But I just didn't think the mattes applied as pigmented and as blendable as I wanted them to. So for me, they're just average mattes. The shimmer's probably better formula, in my opinion. They're like solid, they're good, but the mattes for me were just average. All right, so I think my biggest issue, and I know I'm harping on, but it is what it is. I'm concluding this. I just didn't think the colors in this were as great as I expected them to be. I sort of expected this to be a brighter version of the Melt Gemini palette, which is this palette here, and even though it is a brighter palette, it's nowhere near as versatile as this palette here. I find this palette, I can get green looks, I can get shimmery looks, matte looks, I can deepen them with the black, I can sort of neutralize them out or complete them with the nudes. With this one, I couldn't do that. It was almost like go big or go home. So as I sort of was using this palette, I realized I had to pair it with other palettes for me to like the overall effect. And that doesn't mean that you can't create fantastic looks just using this palette. I've seen some amazing looks online, but you really have to love those really bold colors all over your eye to like just using this palette. And that's not really what I like in a palette. I do like to add a pop of color with a nude or with a gold or with a, I don't know, bronze or something like that. Whereas I found that this was just almost too much color, and even the shades that I thought were going to neutralize the look or ground the look or complete the look, they all were quite colorful in the end. So this one ended up looking like a swampy green, which I did like the color. I think in itself, I like the color. It's quite a nice color. I would definitely use that with like an olive green, but it didn't really work with a lot of the shades in here. So it did work with the greens because it's green toned. If you wanted it to use it to neutralize the green, it won't work. It adds green. And then if you use it with these shades, it actually competes against it and makes it look a little bit like ill and swampy, and that's not what you really want from an orangey look. So I found that this didn't work the best with these, worked all right with these, but if you wanted to use it to pair back the color, similar to how today I used a warm brown to sort of neutralize a little bit the green, that actually doesn't work for that purpose. Same for the highlighter shade. I thought this was going to be a nice way to really neutralize a look or tone down a look, but because it's got a green shift, it just adds green to everything. So for me, this is not a palette that I want to reach for as a complete look. And there are some dud shades in here, like I didn't like this shade. I didn't really like this orange. It was fine, it worked, but I wouldn't reach for this palette to reach for those colors. And I think my issue with this, I went into it with really high expectations, which weren't met. Also, I just feel like I went into this thinking, okay, there's fun colors, there's sort of wearable colors, and there's colors to ground and complete a look. And my expectation of that wasn't met as well because of the tones of these guys here. So for me, this was a bit of a miss. And I think what annoys me probably the most about this is that once you take away the versatility of it, so like I was saying, I thought it would be a daytime palette, a nighttime palette, a fun palette. And when I sort of realized that it's just pretty much all color, which is no problem with all color, but I went into it expecting something else. So when I had the reality check that this is all color, I would have preferred this to be an all green palette. Now, I consider these to be greens. They're just variations of greens. So if you replaced these 4 shades with different shades of green, at least I could go, all right, I want to pop a green with my look. I'll reach for this palette. But as this palette stands with just 3 greens and these sort of off green colors, I actually don't see myself reaching for this very often at all. So I'm not at all trying to say that this is a bad palette. I know a lot of people really love this palette. I know people love Juvia's Place, and that is perfectly fine. But for me, I think I had so much expectation, which it didn't meet. And I have other palettes that I would prefer to reach for than this. So for example, if I was doing a green look, I much prefer the Gemini palette. I think it's a more flattering palette. The formula's better, and you can construct multiple looks just using this palette without having to reach for other palettes. And also I think of like this shade here, which is a beautiful bronzy shade with like an old gold shift. I have the Natasha Denona Gold palette, and pretty much there are multiples of these sort of shades in different finishes. And I would actually prefer to reach for this because once again, you've got some of the greens, you've got some of these gold sort of bronzy colors, but you can ground them using these more mattes and neutral shades. So, and I prefer the formula of this. So for me, yeah, it didn't meet my expectations, which is a shame because I really was excited for this palette. I did create some nice looks with it, but for every nice look I created, I feel like I created a look that I didn't really like. So I didn't love it, sadly. But I totally understand why people do love this palette, so don't take it as a dig. It's just didn't meet my personal requirements. And, you know, makeup is completely subjective. You know, it's about what you expect from it, how much wear you'll get out of it, how easy you thought it was to apply, and how flattering you thought it looked on you. And if you find that this ticks all your boxes, then fucking enjoy it. Go your good thing. But for me, I keep looking for something that is going to beat the Gemini palette, and unfortunately, it hasn't. I still wear this and feel like I'm living my best life. I wear this and I feel like I'm living my clown life. So unfortunately, anytime I want a green, I'm going to reach for this over this. Now, I do have to say that I am quite disappointed that I didn't love this palette. Like, I know a lot of people will be like, damn, Kat didn't like the palette. And I feel the same way. I really wanted to love this palette. I bought it with the hopes that it will be my next like holy grail green palette. But yeah, it's left me feeling a little bit flat, which, yeah, it disappoints me as much as it disappoints anyone who's a Juvia's Place lover and was hoping that I would rave about this palette. I was hoping I'd do that too. So yeah, apologize if my opinions are different to other people's, but that's the beauty of opinions. We all have different ones and it's perfectly okay. So yeah, anyway, I'll leave that there. And let me know what you think about Juvia's Place in general. What do you think about this palette? Yeah, I'm curious. I know lots of people love it. And I know a lot of people said they decluttered their Juvia's Place palette. So I sort of feel like I'm in between somewhere. All right, guys, I'll see you next time. Bye.